My name is City Councilor at Large Michael Flaherty. We are here today to discuss Docket 0900. That's an ordinance to provide legal representation of the Boston Groundwater Trust by the City of Boston Law Department. This ordinance was sponsored by my council colleague, Councilor Kenzie Bach, myself, and Councilor Lydia Edwards, and referred to the committee back on August 18th of 2021. In accordance with Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meetings in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public. The City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom, and it is being recorded. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to the public health accommodations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate and alternative means. The public may watch this hearing via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv and on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, Verizon 964. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. If you wish to provide public comments and have not signed up to do so, please email Christine O'Donnell at Christine with a C .O'Donnell, ODONNELL at boston.gov to receive the link. This proposal seeks to amend the City of Boston Code Ordinance Chapter 5, Section 8, and allow for the Boston Groundwater Trust to be provided with legal representation by the City of Boston Law Department. Joining us today as panelists will be Robert Whitney, co-chair and trustee of the Boston Groundwater Trust. Good morning, Rob. Good to see you. Christian Siminelli, executive director of the Boston Groundwater Trust. Good also to see Christian. And I also see that we're joined by Greg Gaylor as well. And the committee will also hear public comments. I will now turn it over to the lead sponsor, our colleague, City Councilor Kenzie Bach.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you everybody for being at this hearing today. This is, it's a straightforward small issue, but it has a big impact on one of the key custodians of the public trust here in Boston, our groundwater trust. And I'm grateful to you, Councilor Flaherty, for being a co-sponsor with me, along with Councilor Edwards. On a city built on this much fill, there is no more important stewardship, I would say, than the groundwater levels. The many historic buildings that we treasure rely on that shared stewardship. And the reality is that the trust undertakes that work on behalf of the city, and it does so in a context in which there are economic interests at play. There are potential, insurance issues at play. There are all kinds of things with a legal dimension. And so really, as a new councilor, it was sort of eye-opening and alarming to me to learn that the trust, despite really being an extension of the city, is not set up right now to receive legal defense from the City of Boston and legal defense and advice when necessary. And I think that's a pretty key chink in their armor, as it were. And so the piece of legislation that's before you today is really a pretty straightforward thing, but it's just designed to solve that and make sure that it's clear that our Corporation Counsel Office and Boston's legal resources are there and available to the trust. And I know, I know Rob's on. We've got volunteer board members of the Groundwater Trust who we are grateful for their service. And I don't think any of us want them as individuals taking on the liability and a lack of representation that we've sort of ended up set up with here. So that's really the thrust of the thing, Mr. Chairman, and I'll leave it to others to just expound on in a little more detail. But my sense is that this really is something that we can repair pretty easily with this piece of legislation, and that in so doing, we will be fixing something that we should have done a while ago. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bach. I see that our colleague, City Councilor Ed Flynn, is on as well. Ed, if you have any opening comments.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty, Councilor Bach, Councilor Edwards. Providing legal counsel to the Groundwater Commission is something that should have been done a long time ago. I want to thank the sponsors for addressing this issue. The Groundwater Commission plays a critical role in the lives of so many residents and neighborhoods in the city of Boston, especially in and around the South End, the Bay Village, the Back Bay, Beacon Hill, Fort Point area. So I just want to say thank you to the sponsors. I also want to say thank you to the panelists for being here, Christian and Rob, as well as Greg. Proud to support this, and thank you to my colleagues for their leadership.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. And then just the two questions I have that hopefully Rob and Christian can answer in their remarks is that I'd like to get maybe some background as to why the Boston Water Ground Trust members have not been provided with representation from the city of Boston to date. And also if they can explain any situations where the Boston Groundwater Trust members have sought City of Boston legal services and or a formal opinion from the city in the past, just to shed some light on that. So without further ado, Rob, you have the floor. Just for the record, if you can introduce yourself for folks that are tuned in and give us your thoughts.
I will do so. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Flaherty, Councilors Bach, Edwards, and Flaherty are co-sponsors of Docket 0900 and also the remaining councilors of the Boston City Council. My name is Rob Whitney. I am the co-chair of the Boston Groundwater Trust. The Boston City Council established the trust in 1986 to monitor groundwater levels in those many areas of the city where the historic wooden pilings that form the foundations of buildings are threatened by low groundwater levels. And further, the trust was established to make recommendations to raise, restore, and protect the water table in those areas where it is low to protect those wooden piles and other types of foundations of buildings to prevent them from collapsing and injuring residents of the city. I was originally nominated to the board of the trust a little over 3 years ago by the Beacon Hill Civic Association, where I'm the current chair of the board of directors. As many of you will recall, buildings in part of Beacon Hill have been adversely affected and damaged by the lowering of groundwater tables. So particularly in the flat area between Charles Street and Charles River, that was constructed on landfill during the last century. Many parts of the city have been constructed on landfill. Many of the areas that Councilor Flynn just mentioned, and the Groundwater Trust was designed to work together with the other parts of the city to protect those areas. The Trust Board of Trustees, who are all unpaid volunteers, have worked tirelessly over the years since the trust first came into being many years ago to incorporate those existing groundwater observation wells that had been installed originally on public property for various different projects into a comprehensive monitoring network. Today, as a result of this work, this network has grown into a network of thousands of groundwater observation wells that extend over many parts of the city that were originally built on landfill. The city also established a groundwater conservation overlay district, the GCOD, that requires people building on or renovating properties in the in the area to make sure that their projects do not cause any reduction in groundwater levels, and to incorporate systems that will recharge rainwater into the ground instead of sending it into streets and runoffs. This is again to maintain the groundwater levels in these landfill areas. The trust is tasked with protecting the levels of groundwater within the GCOD to ensure the safety of the area's buildings and its residents. While the volunteer trustees have worked to protect the city's infrastructure and citizens from the harmful effects of the lowering of these groundwater levels, as I've mentioned, the Corporation Council of the City of Boston has issued an opinion that the trustees of the trust, as well as the trust officers, members, employees, and volunteers, are not to be deemed to be officers and employees of the City of Boston under the current language set forth in the City of Boston Code Ordinance 5, Section 5-8.1, under which the city's Corporation Council does provide legal representation to other officers, employees of the City of Boston. As a result of the Law Department's opinion, in which they're interpreting the current language that's set forth in the existing ordinance city code, they cannot, in their opinion, represent or give legal advice to any trustee, officer, or employee of the trust on any question of law connected with the discharge of the trustee's official duties. And they will not appear as counsel in any suits, actions, or prosecutions which may involve the rights or interests of the trust itself. The Law Department has also opined that it will not and cannot defend the trustees or the officers or employees of the trust in any suits that are brought against them. for their official actions carrying out the work of the trust in protecting our city's neighborhoods. As a result, the real possibility exists that the trustees, who are all, as I mentioned, all unpaid volunteers, will be required to retain their own counsel if they are ever sued for their official actions in carrying out the work of the trust in protecting the buildings and residents of our city's neighborhoods. In fact, the trust has been required to purchase insurance specifically that deals with providing and giving us the power to basically pay for legal counsel should, in fact, we be sued as a result of any actions brought against the trust. This, of course, is expensive to the trust, but is necessary in light of the City Corporation Council's opinion. Therefore, on behalf of the board of the Boston Groundwater Trust, I respectfully request that the council adopt this ordinance that will specifically provide that the trustees, as well as the trust officers, members, employees, and volunteers, will be deemed to be, quote, officers or employees, close quote, of the City of Boston, and thereby allow the city's law department to provide needed legal representation to the trustees to continue to freely work on behalf of the residents of the city and to protect the thousands of buildings that remain threatened by potentially low levels of groundwater. Thank you very much for allowing me to provide these remarks in support of the ordinance. I would now like to introduce Christian Siminelli, the Executive Director of the Boston Groundwater Trust, who will offer further testimony in support of this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Welcome, Christian. If you could also state your name and affiliation for the record.
Will do. Thank you, Rob. Good morning, councilors. Thank you very much for having us today. Christian Siminelli, I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Groundwater Trust. And as Rob just mentioned, many of the buildings in the Boston's filled land neighborhoods are supported wood pilings that will last indefinitely if they remain submerged below the groundwater table. If the groundwater table drops and the pilings ultimately can begin to decay, the buildings can settle unevenly, term known as differential settlement, and this will eventually lead to extensive and very expensive repairs not covered by insurance and are borne solely by the homeowner. In the worst case, it could result in the total loss of a building. But thankfully, property values are so high that that's becoming less and less likely by the year. The trust was established by the City Council in 1986. Our 13-member volunteer board of trustees includes 9 members appointed by the mayor upon the recommendation of the designated residential, commercial, and preservation groups, 3 appointed ex officio by the mayor, and 1 appointed ex officio by the president of the City Council. After a period of dormant activity, Mayor Menino, who had been on the council when the trust was established, appointed new co-chairs and reactivated this organization in 1997. And it's really been since that time that the trust has made immense progress, including, as Rob mentioned, the installation of the vast observation well network to monitor the groundwater levels, the establishment of the City-State Groundwater Working Group, which includes public entities that have significant underground infrastructure in the areas of interest to maintain and repair that infrastructure if it has a negative impact on the groundwater table. Creation and this past summer updates to the Groundwater Conservation Overlay District in Article 32 of the Zoning Code. We've also secured funding to the Department of Environment, Energy, and Open Space since 2008, and we receive an annual contribution from the Boston Water and Sewer Commission since 2003, and that's really the nuts and bolts of our operating funds are really from those 2 income sources right there. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Inspectional Services Department, and the Boston Planning and Development Agency. These agencies have all been outstanding colleagues over the years in assuring compliance for projects that are cited for GCOD. Although a small operation, the trust has become the go-to organization to preserve wood piling supported buildings in the city. Buildings that represent a remarkable history of Boston and have a significant and are a significant part of the city's residential tax base. Make no mistake, this has worked when we want to ensure that it continues to work. In keeping with your unwavering support throughout the years, I'm here today to ask you, the council who founded us, to continue supporting our organization. I look forward to working with the council on resolving this issue before you today, and thank you for providing this forum and the opportunity to provide comment.
Thank you very much, Christian. And I see Greg. Greg, if you'd like to just add any thoughts or comments, well, I appreciate you being here.
Great. Thank you, Council Flaherty and Councilors Bach and Flynn, and the opportunity to be here today. I'm Greg Gaylor, the Executive Director of the Boston Preservation Alliance, but I'm here as a trustee of the Boston Groundwater Trust. I've been a trustee almost for my entire tenure at the Preservation Alliance, which just hit 9 years. I didn't prepare any formal remarks. I just wanted to reiterate how important this is to the city, to not only to its historic character and the core aspects of what brings people to Boston, why people love Boston, but also the economic aspects. As you know, and as Christian mentioned, the value of these properties is very high. The issue of groundwater and potential damage to these buildings is significant. And we all know when significant dollars are at play, that lawsuits come into play as well. Thankfully, the trust has not seen a lot of lawsuits, and Christian can speak to a couple of specific examples. But this particular issue of legal representation has been, and Christian will attest to the fact, a concern of mine for my entire tenure at as a trustee. We have a liability we need to close the door on and allow the trust to continue its good work. I also want to note that the history of the Groundwater Trust and the monitoring wells actually goes back to the WPA in the 1930s. And so this has been an issue and a concern for a long time. But it's important to note that paying attention to these wells and this issue has ebbed and flowed over the years. And people thought about it and forgot about it. And we're now in a really good spot. Christian, under his leadership, the Groundwater Trust has made really good progress. As he noted, the dialogue with key infrastructure controlling entities in the city and the state are really good. The groundwater improvements continue. The regulation continues. We don't want to lose the great progress we've had. In a major lawsuit in the current situation would impair and impact that great progress that we're doing for the council, for the entire city, for the residents, for the tourists, for the real estate industry, for the tax base, at no real significant huge cost to the city, the minor contributions that Christian mentioned. It's a lean and mean operation that punches way above its weight class. So I really encourage you to support this, to support the trust and allow it to continue its work without the unfortunate possibility of a lawsuit really derailing a really successful, important operation for the history, infrastructure, and tax base of the city. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Greg. And Kenzie, I'm going to turn it over to you just for any line of questioning that you have, followed by Councilor Flynn.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. And I'll also say that, as you know, it isn't the sort of custom of our law department to come to these hearings and testify, but I understand them not to have any objection to the form of this piece of legislation. I think the Corporation Council's memo that was cited earlier by Rob was not intended to express a lack of desire to represent the Groundwater Trust, but simply an interpretation of the current ordinances on the books to say that it wasn't within the legal department's remit. So I just wanted to say they're not here, but for those watching at home, that's sort of customary on their part. But I think they're more than willing to take on this responsibility if we put it in the law. So I just wanted to enter that key point, Mr. Chairman. And then, yeah, I mean, otherwise, just I think this is less of a question. It's more, I just wanted to reemphasize what one of you just said. I mean, I'll just say that from my perspective as a counselor, I work with the Groundwater Trust like I do the other pieces of city government. And when we're in internal city scoping sessions about a project, Christian is there looking at the groundwater angle, and at a ZBA meeting, the ZBA is looking for Christian sign off. So I just really want to emphasize that although we do count on this volunteer board support for the executive director, this is not sort of a third party watchdog off in a corner doing its own thing. It really is completely integrated into the mechanisms of city government and stewarding this resource. So I just want to say that's been extremely apparent to me in my years so far on the council.
Well said. Thank you, Councilor Bach. Councilor Flynn, any questions of the panelists?
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I don't have any questions per se, but just want to highlight the leadership of Christian. I've had several hearings as chair of city and neighborhood services. Christian attended and provided the residents with an update on exactly what the groundwater does was a hearing with the water and sewer to educate the public on some of the city departments that play a critical role in our neighborhoods that often don't receive the publicity or receive the receive recognition for their work. So I just wanted to acknowledge the incredible work of the Groundwater Trust and for being available and accessible to residents across the city, especially neighborhood associations. Christian has often come out and talked to residents at nighttime and explained what the groundwater does. So thank you, Christian. I also, one final point I wanted to make is the Groundwater Trust installed a well. This was about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, in East Boston. And I was there for the installation of the well. I was probably on site for about 3 hours. It's not my district, but I wanted to make sure I was able to see how it works. But it was a major construction project. There was a lot of activity going on, and having legal representation for the groundwater team is necessary because they play a critical role in development of our city and keeping our city strong and healthy. So I just want to say thank you to Christian, to Rob, who I work with on Beacon Hill issues as well, and to say thank you to Greg. No further questions or comments, Council Flaherty. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. To Michelle Goldberg, is there anyone in the waiting room that is wishing to offer public testimony?
I do see, Mr. Chairman, that Rob Whitney's hand is back up.
Very good, Rob. You have the floor, Rob.
Yeah, I just wanted, sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to reiterate something Councilor Bach had said in my remarks with respect to the law department. My remarks exactly what the councilor said. It's the interpretation of the ordinance that was the issue. It was the language set forth, and that's why this ordinance is so important, because it actually changes that text to allow the law department to help the trust. Before, they felt constrained that they couldn't based on the current language. This helps them and helps us by allowing them to be free to provide us with legal advice, to provide us with legal counsel. And we look forward to working with them going forward as needed, not only to provide us with legal counsel, but also legal advice for, as Councilor Flynn just mentioned, sometimes legal issues come up, and it'd be great to have a resource that we could reach out to. And the legal department assuming we get this passed, they will be happy to do so. It's my understanding as well. Thanks very much.
That'd be great. And that's a great point, Rob, you made. So back to Michelle Goldberg. Michelle, is there anyone wishing to offer public testimony?
Mr. Chair, I don't think we have anyone waiting for public testimony.
Very good. And I also see that Chantel from the acting administration is on, and obviously welcome to Chantel, unless Chantel has any thoughts on behalf of the administration.
No, thank you, Councillor.
Very good, Chantel.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Yep, thank you for your involvement. And back to Councilor Bach as the lead sponsor. Any parting comments before we close out?
Mr. Chairman, that obviously, I think we're having a short hearing today because this is something that there's broad consensus on, and it's really a technical fix. And so I hope that you will offer a positive report on this at Wednesday's meeting, and that it's something we can fix. I just want to say, I take seriously, as I know you do and Councillor Flynn does, our sort of fiduciary responsibility as officers of the city of Boston. And so extending the city's legal resources is not something that we do lightly. It's not something that we would do to a sort of genuine third party. But and that's really what I've really tried to stress today is that this is really about acknowledging what is in fact the case, which is that the Boston Groundwater Trust really was set up to be and is a sort of organ of the city of Boston. And despite the fact that it has, a particular governance structure, et cetera, as a number of other kind of boards and commissions connected to the city do, it's very much part and parcel, and it has a public purpose. And so I just want to stress that because obviously it's an important thing for us to do, but it's not something that we would do lightly or frequently with just any kind of entity. So.
Good. Well said, and I concur wholeheartedly as today's chair, as well as getting a committee report turned around quickly. So to Rob and Christian and Greg, obviously, thanks for your work and involvement and expertise around the Groundwater Trust, and obviously to Greg on the Preservation Alliance. You guys do great work on behalf of our city. And this, as Councilor Barker just alluded to, this is an important piece of sort of giving you guys the protection or the access to maybe getting a legal opinion and or having someone have your back in the case that you're there working on behalf of the residents and you have that support and backup from your council, but also from folks that represent the city and its legal affairs. So with that, I have no further comments with respect to docket 0900. The Committee on Government Operations will be adjourned. Thank you and good to see everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, everybody.